Hi everyone, trust you guys are doing very well. Welcome to our next lesson. And this lesson is part 2 of our JavaScript course. And in this lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to add JavaScript to your HTML or your documents. All right, so the first thing that I've created now is I created a folder called Sandbox right here. So we've got our Sandbox folder. So I'm going to right click it. I'm going to open it with Visual Studio Code. You can open it with any editor of your choice. If you prefer Sublime Text, Atom, or Node++, you can use your text editor as you wish. Right, so we're just going to open with code. Right, so now we open in Visual Studio Code. Basically, we got our Sandbox file open. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new file, index.html. Now, we're not going to do any HTML and CSS courses or anything like that. Know that you guys, trust that you guys know HTML and CSS by taking this course. Right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to create a boilerplate. It's exclamation mark and tab. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put here JavaScript. Okay. Just create a title of JavaScript. Right, now there's two ways that you can add. Let me just get straight into it. There's two ways to add JavaScript to your file. All right. The first one, it works more or less the same way you would add CSS to your to your HTML document. The first way of adding CSS is with the link. Not that. I'm just using Emmet, guys. Right, so this is your external CSS. Let me just write here, external CSS, and this is basically your internal CSS. So with your internal CSS, you will obviously use your style tags. And with your, I'm just using a paragraph. All right, and we're just going to say color gray. Right, so basically now we got our external CSS and we got our internal CSS. With JavaScript is more or less the same. But with JavaScript, what we do is we have only used the script tag. And then you can add your JavaScript code. Let me just put here internal. Okay, so we got our internal JavaScript, and the next one that you've guessed is called external. All right, so with the internal, just like this, your code goes between the tags. And with the external, basically, we still have the script tag, but we add a source attribute. Now, I'm just going to create a new file called app.js. Right, so the file is created right there. And I'm just going to link it to that file.js. All right, so if you created a folder, let's say we call this folder JS, meaning JavaScript, and I move this file in there. I just changed this part right here to js.fjs. Right, so it means it's in that file right there. Because if you don't add a folder in front, it will not find the document. Okay, so this is basically your internal. So your JavaScript goes between these two tag elements, between these two tags, inside this element. So JavaScript here. And with an external, the JavaScript goes right here. Right, let me just not save that. Right, let me save here. Now, the question that you might ask, let's say we create an H2 with hello, and we create a button. the class of btn, and just say button. Right. Now, what will happen now is there's benefits of having your script tags right here. The modern way is actually to have your script tags in the head section. The old way of doing things is to actually have your scripts at the bottom right here. This is the old way of doing things. Now, I'm just going to explain to you why the old way is not okay to do anymore. Now, basically, if you have a large website, let's say you've got a small website, this will work. Everything is fine, perfectly, it will be okay. But the problem is, on larger websites, this can cause major performance issues for your website and can actually slow your website down. Not a good idea, right? So that's why there's a modern way of adding JavaScript to your document. So I just bumped my mic there. My apologies. Right, so the first thing that you guys can do, now, let me explain why it can cause performance issues and problems of actually having your script tags in the head part of your thing. Because we have learned that this, in your bottom part, just before your closing body tag, this can cause on larger websites. On smaller websites, you add your tags there, carry on as normal. But I would prefer you guys to start learning how to edit in the head section. Now, the problem that you might face without the modern syntaxes is actually if your JavaScript code runs, because I might hear somebody, yeah, but let me explain it. Your JavaScript code, the web browser will start loading and parsing your document from the top, go down, load your JavaScript, load this part right here, then continue to load your HTML. Now, the problem with that is, now let's say on this part, let me just create a constant called button equals to document query selector, and we're just going to tell him, listen, I'm looking for that button. Now, the problem that you might see already, now let's say as we're loading down here and we get here. Now the browser load and parse this, but it will say, listen, I'm not finding the button because your JavaScript, your HTML is not loaded before the JavaScript. That needs actually the DOM element right here, your button right here. Is actually looking for the button, but it's not been found yet because it's not been loaded and parsed yet by the browser. Now, the way to get around this problem is actually, like I've explained earlier, is to actually have this being loaded at the bottom. This is the old way to work around this problem. So basically, your HTML will always load first before your JavaScript. But the modern way of doing it, we have two secret weapons in your arsenal. Okay, so the first one that you're going to have, not really secret, I'm just calling it secret to be more dramatic, but the first one that we have is called defer. And the second one that we have is called async. Let me just call it like this, async. All right, so you have these two methods, the defer method and the async method. Now, you might wonder, but when do I use which one and when do I use the other? But first, before we get into that, let me just quickly explain what will happen now. So basically what will happen is your browser will start loading and parsing the document, and it will get to this part right here. It will see the script and it will read defer. Okay, it will say, okay, let me continue. And when it gets here, loaded a whole and parse the document, it will load and parse the JavaScript at the same time. How cool is that? So basically what will happen now is your browser will get here and says, okay, defer. Okay, so means continue loading the HTML. Once it's finished loaded, it will load the script and the HTML at the same time. Very, very, very handy to do. Right. Now, the next thing that you will need is to know is, but why would I use the defer one and not the async one? Now, you might have a problem. So let's say we added the async right there. So basically what will happen now is if the browser starts at the top, it will load, it will come here, and it will say, okay, async. All right, so basically means, okay, I'll continue downloading the website, the browser, the content, but as soon as this is finished loaded, it will actually start loading the script. So if your script is 2 kilobytes, it will actually almost load instantly, or depends on the internet connection of your user, and it will load it as soon as it finishes downloading. Now, you might have another problem with async. Now, let's say you've got 4 files right here. This one is 200 megabytes. Let me just use an example. This one is 200 megabytes. It's not supposed to be that big, but I'm just want to make it very simple. 2 megabytes. This one is 10 kilobytes. And this one is 100 kilobytes. All right, now what will happen is with async. All right, your browser comes, it says, okay, I need to load this. It continues downloading the rest. But now the problem is, you will obviously note that this one will load before this one, and this one will load before the 2 megabytes, and the 2 megabytes will load before the 10 megabytes. So basically, if you want your files to load, you say, okay, I want this file to load first, I want this one to load first, I want this one to load first, second, or third, or fourth. It doesn't matter. The order of this cannot be guaranteed because of the size of your file. So the one that will load the quickest will be the one file that will load first. Now, I'm just showing you the problems first before I provide you solutions. Okay. Now the problem with async is, if your HTML document right here your JavaScript is dependent on HTML document right here, I would not use async. But if it's independent and doesn't need any dependencies or something in the DOM, I would load it with async. Okay. But let me get into the async and defer. I'm going to touch on the same things again. Okay. So let me go over the async one again. Scripts loaded using the async attribute, this one right here, will download the script without blocking the rendering of the page. Okay, and it will execute it as soon as the script finishes downloading. So the one with 10 kilobytes will obviously load quicker than the one with 100 or that. So basically this one will load, then this, then this, then this. Okay, because of the size. Okay, you will get no guarantee that scripts will run in a specific order. So basically, as you put them here, you will have no guarantee. Whoever loads first will be the one that will display it first. Okay. It's the best to use async when the scripts on the page work independently from one another. They don't depend on any other scripts. They basically, all the code is just basically encapsulated in that document that you have right there. Okay. Async should be used when you have a bunch of background scripts to load in, and you should just want to get the place as soon as possible. So if you have a bunch of background scripts to load, use async. Okay. So with the defer method, I would recommend, if you have things that you like, the button, for instance, that we need to load. So let's say this script is dependent on elements in the DOM. You need to use the defer method. Okay, so basically what will happen now is it will load the HTML and the script at the same time to make sure that the dependency that JavaScript depends on the DOM element, it will actually load and not give you an error. All right, so let me quickly summarize. The async and defer method both instruct the browser to download the scripts in separate thread while the rest of the page, the DOM, is downloading, so that the page is not blocked by the script. So basically in the before method, so basically if we do this, no defer method, if we come, the browser comes down, the script will block this part from running. Okay? Because if this depends, let me just create a LED and button equals to document selector. You guys don't have to worry about what all of this means. I'll get to explain it a bit later for you guys. Okay, so this is very important to note how it works, why it works. Okay, so I'm overkilling it a bit, but so basically if it comes here, it will give an error because the JavaScript is looking for the HTML, but it cannot find the class of btn because this JavaScript is looking for the class of btn. Okay, so with the defer method, because it needs something in the document here, the browser will see that and it will actually continue loading the DOM while it's waiting to finish the HTML. Once it's finished, then it will actually load the script and your HTML at the same time. Right? So if you have scripts that should run independently from one another, they don't have dependencies, then you use async. So basically, if it is a script that doesn't need anything from the DOM, any background tasks and stuff like that, use async. Because sometimes what you will have is you will have jQuery. Let's say you load a jQuery script right there, but the other script, let me just put in jQuery. Just using it as an example. Just an example. So jQuery loads here and JavaScript here. If this script is dependent on the jQuery, I will not use async for this. Okay, I would use the defer method on this one. Okay, and async right there, because this will load, but this will wait for the whole DOM to load. Okay, because this script right here is dependent on jQuery. Right, I'm overkilling it a bit, but it's good. So if you have any questions and stuff like that, please leave it in the comment section. And if you have a script that needs to wait for parsing, depends on other scripts on the DOM being in place, load them using the defer. Okay, putting the corresponding scripts in order you want them to execute in the browser. Okay, so I can just basically use defer like this. Then basically what will happen now is this one will load first, that one will load second, and if I need another script to load again, I will use it like this. So basically this one will load first, then that. But good practice is to load all the other scripts first and your custom script last. Okay. So basically any of your custom extra JavaScript scripts that you have, load them, put them at the bottom so that it loads last. Okay. Because normally you will have dependencies from this script that depends on the other ones. You just put it last. All right. That brings us to an end of this video. I know it's a bit long, but I don't want to not give you guys all the information so that you guys know how it all works. So as you continue with your courses and things like that, you don't get funny errors and you ask why I'm getting this error and why do I see this happening and why do I see this. All right, thank you guys for watching. Please give it a like if you liked the video, dislike it if you dislike it. Please give me some constructive feedback how I can improve the video and things like that. Really appreciate you guys and see you in the next one.